This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Content Marketing World, the world's premier content marketing event. Find out more at contentmarketingworld.com today. Use the offer code BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 550, An Ethical Stand. July 8th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. One of the more infuriating things about management consultancies moving in on agency turf is that the same consultancies are also actively managing agency pitches to their clients. Now WPP is saying no more. Will it have impact? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, why marketing should oversee HR messaging, whether Walmart has the will to challenge Amazon, taxonomy instead of cookies, plus the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the host of the Wendi Cooper Show, Speaking of Age, direct-to-consumer marketing consultant, Ms. Wendi Cooper. Wendi, welcome back.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.
Now, we also have with us the founder and CEO of the Firebrand Group, which is now part of Proponent, host of the Future Proof podcast, Mr. Jeremy Goldman. Jeremy, welcome back.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, next, he's the head of strategy of Universal McCann in Melbourne, author, speaker, Mr. Eaon Pritchard. Eaon, it's been way too long. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bob. It's great to be. I was actually just looking last night, and it's 4 years since I was last on, so time flies.
It really does. So sorry. Should have got you on way before this, but we finally did it. We got you back.
Yeah.
And finally, he's president and chief creative officer at Allscope, as well as a board member of Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hi, Jonathan.
Bob, you will be happy to know I'm going to tone down my swearing for today's show.
Well, that's fantastic, because you know I don't like editing all those F-bombs out, so very, very pleased to hear this. Well, let's jump right in. First up on the topic agenda, WPP has put their foot down about consultancy-led pitches. They're basically saying we are totally out. We're banning participation in any pitch led by a consultancy. The premise is that the management consultancies are now competitors, so their objectivity of such pitches is in question, and also the ability to gain competitive insights and other types of information is astronomical. Eaon, is this sour grapes or a legitimate concern here? What's your take on this?
Yeah, it's the interesting thing. I mean, this has just sort of bubbled up into the news, but I mean, it's not a new conversation by any stretch, and it's something, particularly in media agencies. Obviously, there's been a sort of I wouldn't say concern, but it's something that's definitely been noted, and I think so. WPP have come out and made a sort of a statement about it, but it's something everyone has kind of known that was going on. But the interesting thing for me, and I guess for the listeners as well that are maybe not as close, if you take a step back and look objectively really at the sort of landscape. So there's within Accenture, however you want to say it, obviously there's numerous business units within there, and the sort of conflict or the clash here is among two really in particular. So you've got their media management service, which goes in and audits on behalf of clients. They'll go in and audit media agencies. And then you've got Accenture Interactive, which is their, 10 years old now, really, but they've been making inroads into media and communications. But the interesting thing when you look at it, the Accenture Interactive, which sounds, the way they've sort of branded it, it sounds like a small sort of offshoot, right? But Accenture Interactive, which is about 10% of the total Accenture operation, is of a comparable size to any of the big agency holding companies, and their strategy has been very sort of similar to WPP, which is going around and buying up creative shops, media shops, particularly digital. I think they're now the biggest digital network in the world. So I think it is a legitimate challenge from WPP, but it's also just the nature of the business now. So it's the competitive environment we have to deal with. This year Accenture bought the big headline sort of buy for them was Droga, obviously, but they've bought up lots of.
Well, they didn't buy up Droga. I mean, I know all the headlines love to say that they bought up Droga, but they bought a minority stake in Droga.
Well, invested.
Yeah.
But it's just the funny thing is, is it sour grapes from WPP? It's kind of, what Accenture have done is almost mimicked WPP's strategy, because they obviously went on a big acquisition.
But it's a little bit different.
In amongst research and market research.
It's a little different, though, Ian. It's a little bit different, and I can see why WPP is so upset about this particular situation, because it's one thing to know that you're working against the management consultancies now, that they're a whole new type of competitor. But when you get into the fact that they're also running pitches, and they're also putting together entire architectures for business transformation for these companies, and suddenly to be competing against that, and then have to run your pitch in front of them and give all the information to them. I mean, you can say that there's ethics involved in place, and there's firewalls built into the process, but you know how that works. I mean, it's not necessarily going to happen, and it's going to be competitive disadvantage across the board to be pitching to management consultants when you're pitching for business.
Well, you're definitely showing your hand. I mean, no, there's no doubt about that. But look, do you guys mind if I chime in here quick?
No, go for it.
Okay, because I was going to anyway. I'm kidding. Okay, so but listen, as you know, Bob, I've worked at Ogilvy, DDB, Martin Agency, FCB, blah, blah, blah. And the truth of the matter is this, is that whether the consultants are going to compete with you or not, there's been a war between the advertising agencies themselves and the pitch consultants for years. You're spending a lot of money. I was just talking to my friend Sarah Olvera about this yesterday, and it's so true. What happens is they're trying to guide you to win or lose, and whether they're the competition or they're a frenemy or whatever, they're still stacking the deck to who they think should win it. And it's so transparent that everybody knows. I always felt when I was at the Martin Agency, we knew we were going to win a pitch before it started, depending upon who the consultant was. So I think in my opinion, it's less about the competition and more about sour grapes. WPP has never owned a property that was a darling of the pitch consultants. And I speak from experience.
Has never owned a darling of the pitch consultants as a whole. I can understand that would make them skeptical of the process, but everybody's skeptical of the process, Jonathan. I mean, everybody's skeptical about having to put their work in front of a pitch consultancy instead of having a direct relationship with the client. But it adds insult to injury, doesn't it? When you're talking about having the management consultancies, which are actively competing with the agencies, also running pitches. I mean,
Absolutely.
I can see that
Absolutely.
it being.
I'm just saying that even when if you need a global agency and there's only 5 that have the reach that you're looking for, that might make sense. But when it comes to US centric advertising, what I've found is that it's typically the consultancies trying to stack the deck. And you're absolutely right. It is adding insult to injury in those cases, just because, look, what ends up happening is you're feeding the competition that you're going to go against someday. And that's happening all over the place, not just with the pitch consultants. That's happening with the digital centric agencies as well.
I think I was, I was doing campaign management, client-side campaign management, and all of this since 1997, and creative at the same time, and dealing with, managing the media, the television advertising media for the client, and just kind of being the heartbeat and the nucleus on the client side. Long before I think they had all of these consultancy things, the management stuff that's now everywhere, and you're talking about all of this stuff, and it's kind of always been an issue. But as the management consultancy, on the level that I was at, where I would win the client, and then I would do basically everything for them. I would set up their entire campaign. I would do the creative. I would do the media, whether it was radio, television, national cable, online. But at the same time, I always had to make sure that my next gig would come along. So I always had to play fair. Right. So I don't know if I'm talking about the same thing or not, because I'm really not in the big agency world. But I do think that from the consultancy side, at the end of the day, if you just have to play fair, because I can see how, like if it was Havas, right? I used to not really agree with the way that they would do their testing for direct response on television, because I knew that they had this method that they did, and then they would change it as soon as they would win the account. And then all of a sudden the results would go down, because, they were just playing this game of, well, we're going to win it because we're going to have the cheapest media. It's going to perform the best because we're going to give it to you super cheap. Your media efficiency ratio, or whatever you want to call it, will be through the roof. And then the next thing you know, they win the client, they get the gig, and the rates go up. So me as a consultant, I knew they played that game. And I would always advise the client that, you have to watch out. Let's go with a boutique firm or a boutique agency that's going to be, managing and buying your media, as opposed to the big guy that just wants to get, another client in the door.
But what you're describing, Wendi, is exactly what the problem with this situation is. I mean, it's just like, yes, you're an ethical consultant. You're just telling them the facts about the fact that this agency wasn't doing the best job possible. You look at yourself as the good guy here in that, yes. And so does the management consultancies look at themselves as the good guys. They're looking at the fact that they're concerned about the entire business output of this organization. That's their client. And if they feel like an agency is not up to par, they're going to tell them that an agency is not up to par. And that's problematic when you're also a competitor. I mean, it's a problematic situation. It's not unheard of. I mean, everybody has that pitch they've been in where one of the competing agencies has written the RFP for the client. We all know how it works. I mean, it's about relationships, but to have it so blatantly out in the open is problematic in the extreme.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you guys, just having come from a big agency background, the 3 truths of this are: number one, every agency, everywhere I've ever worked, all the biggest ones, it's a bait and switch. You go in there and the work never gets sold. You switch out the team to more junior level and more cost-effective people for profitability. And the work that you say you're going to do never gets completed. Ever. I have yet ever in my entire career, and we've won everything, and not once did we pitch something and do that work ever.
I think that's true. I think that really, Bob, what you're getting at the heart is incentives have to be aligned, and also, frankly, not every situation is created equally. It's not like every single management consultancy competes with respect to every single service, so you really do have to look at it as a case-by-case basis and say there are certain situations where you're just going to realize the fact that a management consultancy is a competitor in one specific circumstance, but there are also others where that might not be the case.
Jeremy, I think that yes, in the finite sense, it's concerning if you're pitching directly against somebody who is also running the pitch. That's a technicolor breach of ethics, in my opinion. That's not something that doesn't really work in any situation. But say you're in a pharmaceutical pitch, and Accenture is running that pitch for the client. They may not be doing advertising or any marketing for that client, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to be. And at some point, the intelligence gathering that goes on during the pitch process gives them an inside look at every single agency's capabilities and knows where their weak points are and how they compete more effectively. I mean, you don't need to be a direct competitor right now to become a direct competitor down the line, right?
There's another couple of things just to sort of factor into that. I mean, one is that Accenture could make all this go away by just buying WPP, which is which they'd be more than capable of doing. I think even last year, the end of year predictions. I remember reading a couple of people speculating that was it's probably not going to happen this year, but it's probably still an option for them. But anyway, the other thing is, with this spat, it's like, well, where do you draw the line? Because it's not just Accenture. You've got PwC, Deloitte Digital, IBM. All of the big consulting firms are now developing this capability. So what do you say? Well, we're not going to work with any of them,
Well,
so
it's like
just,
this is like any strike. I mean, it may not be a unionized type situation, but it's like a strike. WPP is calling a strike against management consultancies leading pitches. But as with any strike, it's not going to be effective unless the other agencies show solidarity. And what's the likelihood of that, Jonathan? I mean, it's just like, do you see the agencies getting together and saying, no more management consultancy pitches, we're not going to take it? If you as a client want our agency services, you got to find a third-party independent pitch runner to take care of this situation.
Absolutely. Nobody works better together than competing advertising agencies.
So I guess what we're saying is not a chance in hell.
No, it's going to snow in hell tomorrow, and DDB and all of WPP and Omnicom and IPG are just going to say, you know what? We're going to do what's best for the people, the clients, and the participants. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's what a lie sounds like.
It's so true, and I just have to let it soak in, that desperation and despair that comes with that statement. Look, will any of this have an impact on the client in the end? I mean, will they realize that their options are being narrowed if they put out pitches and WPP is always declining if they're running the pitch through a management consultancy? I mean,
why don't they just have it as a checkbox? Let's make it easy, Yeah, you want us to run it over here and there, then, check these two boxes. If not, I mean, at the end of the day, isn't it really up to the client?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's just like, will the client realize that they're not getting the full breadth of their options all the time? Like, they'll be sitting there going, well, where is Ogilvy in this pitch? Well, they've refused to participate. Why did they refuse to participate? Well, because we have a conflict of interest, because we're a management consultancy. I mean, I'm wondering, in that course of that conversation, does the client get pissed at the management consultancies, or does the client say, that WPP, they're so stupid, I'm never going to work with them again anyway? I mean, what's the fallout of this? I mean, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately we're not really talking about that much fallout. I hate to say it, because agencies are very competitive in general as a rule. And what that means is that if somebody chooses not to participate because of something, somebody else is going to say, well, that's fine. We're not going to all collude together. Each one is going to say, well, this is an opportunity for us to jump in. And I feel like you don't generally get that much cooperation at that level. I think that it's some of these accounts are really significant to the bottom line. Now I can see for certain smaller pitches, sure, maybe you don't want to go in and waste your time, but I think frankly sometimes the deck is stacked against an agency right now, and people make certain decisions. I just don't think that you're going to get a number of different consortiums all agreeing to treat this a certain way and refusing to participate out of principle. Because
yeah, that's right. And I don't want to be Mr. Negative here, but again, I was at Ogilvy Corporate, and let me tell you something. To get a network play within a holding company is nearly impossible to make that work, let alone having competing agencies join forces for a common goal of doing what's best. Never going to happen.
Well, we should move on and talk next about the fact that marketing is playing an increasing role in the HR and recruitment departments at organizations. It's something that I've called for a long time, and it's a really interesting story. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening. I've been talking about Content Marketing World for several weeks now. You know my pitch here. They are looking for agencies to come to this event. While 4,000 people are expected at this year's event, agencies have been conspicuously absent at prior events, and they are pulling out the stops trying to get you to show up here. Now, what is Content Marketing World? What should we talk about here? I mean, they are the premier gathering of content marketing professionals in the world. I mean, they're the original, they're the largest. It's an annual gathering in Cleveland. They have nearly every major brand globally showing up at their doors, and they're being keynoted by fabulous speakers like Henry Rollins is going to be there. And I think that's really cool. I don't know if you know Henry Rollins, but I certainly do. But moving beyond that, we have so many people who have been past guests on the BeanCast. I mean, Tamsin Webster is going to be a keynoter there. And Tamsin, she comes on the show all the time. Ann Hanley, who's been on the program a number of times in the past. Ann Hanley wrote Content Rules. She's going to be there. They've got so many great participants. And one participant stands out for me this week. I was going through the list, and Christopher Penn jumped to the top of my list because Christopher Penn is he's one of those people who walks into the room and you immediately know you're in the presence of the smartest person in the room. There's no doubt in your mind that this is the person who understands the inner workings of the black box of digital marketing. And he does such a tremendous job as an analyst, as a thinker, as a thought leader. He's just incredible to see speak, and he's going to be at this event, and he's going to be giving some of his wisdom to the crowd about his content marketing strategies. This is the kind of event that agency people need to come and check out. They are doing things for you like an agency track of sessions, a branded content track. And they even have that free booze event. I mean, I've been talking about that for a couple weeks now. And I want you to remember that if someone is giving you free booze at an exclusive agency cocktail hour, they are serious about wanting you to be at the event. When they break out the free drinks, that's when you know it's important. Plus, don't forget, with 4,000 attendees, with nearly every major brand in attendance, you're going to have hundreds of new business prospects roaming the convention hall. So this is something that your new business team is going to eat up. There really is not a good excuse for you not to send at least one member of your staff, and quite frankly, send multiple members of your staff and come yourself. Definitely be there. September 3rd through the 6th are the dates, so it's coming up fast. Cleveland, Ohio is where it's happening. Don't wait. Register today at contentmarketingworld.com. Use the offer code BeanCast, all capital. I don't know why, but that's the way it happens. That's the way it works. Just use the offer code BeanCast, all caps, and they'll even knock $100 off your price tag for doing it. That's contentmarketingworld.com, offer code BeanCast. Register today, and I'll be looking for you at this year's event. Well, I have said for years, one of your most important branding channels is the organization's recruitment messaging and HR space. Yet this area of HR has been largely left up to the human resources team themselves with little to no involvement by marketing. I mean, at best, you get something that's dictated by the HR department, and the marketing department just kind of hands it off to the designers and they make it. Now, that seems to be changing finally. And Jeremy, what do you believe is driving this evolution, and how important is it, do you think, for this to be happening now, where marketing is getting more involved in the branding efforts and the marketing efforts going on among the recruitment and HR materials?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's it's only about 142 years too late. So it's great to happen, but this is no disrespect to HR departments, but the idea that you would put an aspect of marketing in the hands of people who don't understand marketing and understand other things very, very well, and marketing not so much. It's great that this is being treated very differently now. I think employer branding and employer marketing is a quintessential part of how you market your agency, your brand, your organization these days. And a lot of people have, I'll tell you actually a fun story. We had a company that was dragging their feet on an RFP last year, and they finally said, you know what, we have to amp up our web presence, including our website and all of our social, because the founder had to get on the phone and to try to convince somebody at the last second not to accept another offer, just to, because they realized they needed this person at their team on their team, and there was so little about this company online, positive or negative. There was just nothing there, and they realized that they were going to lose somebody simply, as a result of this, and that things like this happen all the time to major companies. So this is something that is long overdue, and I think that there are a lot of metrics out there to show that this is an incredibly valid use of resources if you start to really market your brand as a place that people should want to work.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that, if you don't present the best possible projection of your company into the marketplace, at all aspects of the marketplace, whether you're talking about recruitment or you're talking about product or you're talking about consumer or business to business, everything needs to be projecting a core identity, or else exactly this situation happens. Before I want to talk also about the HR component and talking internally within an organization. But first, Eaon, how is the situation in Australia? I mean, it's just like, it's one thing to have this North American, centered perspective on how HR is divorced from the marketing department. Is it the same there, and is it changing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100%, I'm not sort of, I can tell you about what goes on in here or other, agency groups I work. It's probably not representative of the sort of employment landscape at large. But I think you can look at, for instance, if everyone be familiar with the idea of double jeopardy in sort of branding. Yeah. So smaller brands have fewer buyers who tend to buy them less often, so bigger brands get more buyers and have more loyalty. And so the elegance of those laws mean it sort of plays out in any sphere, so in recruitment, obviously, the bigger and more famous the company is, they're going to attract a disproportionate share of talent. So I think, to the, marketing playing more of a role in recruitment, I think it does that anyway, implicitly, just because, there'll be more material out there in the market that appeals to, obviously consumers and potential employees. So I don't know if there's any great mystery. HR departments, typically more concerned with internal culture once people are already in the door. Although those activities can be used to make it attractive. Definitely, I do a bit of. I sit on an advisory board for advertising and comms course for one of the universities here, and increasingly the talent come out of the universities that, that, for instance, advertising agencies and media agencies want to attract. They're not so interested in coming to these places anymore because Facebook or Google or something else is more attractive, and that's but that's partly to do with the branding of those companies as well. So I think implicitly any marketing material affects that part of the market as well.
I definitely want you to chime in, Wendi, because it's just like, in my opinion, what we're talking about is direct response. I mean, everything about this, it's consumer capture, it's acquisition. We're also talking about loyalty and advocacy in terms of working internally on employees. It seems like they could really benefit from a lot of the experiences that you have dealt with throughout your career.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I'm not too sure. First of all, I was going to ask for an example from you, how you see marketing playing into a job posting. So, and this plays everything into my age thing, Jonathan, because I actually am working on a platform that I'm going to be announcing where it does bring together the missing links of creative and ageism and work culture and all of these things that are out there. And so it's really interesting to me to talk about human resources, but then again, on the other hand, how do you bring marketing into I think it's impossible, number one, to bring marketing into human resources, because human resources, the mentality of human resources is like, is completely different than marketing.
I see.
Right?
I so totally disagree with you in terms of the sense that if we believe that the brand is an operational paradigm, and that the brand belongs to the CEO, and that every company decision in every organization within every division within that organization, if everybody has to function from a brand perspective, well, then that necessitates the creation of branded experiences, of marketing experiences that are positive experiences for the consumer, for the employees, for everybody who comes in contact with that brand.
Awesome. That's why I wanted to ask you give me kind of a situation, because I get disconnected when I start thinking about marketing. I'm very entrenched right now in doing a lot of research, especially into the over 50 and, people being out of work and not being able to, or getting kicked out of agencies. And, it's just a huge conversation that's going on out there right now. And so I see a lot of job postings. I read a lot of reviews on Indeed where ex-employees are reviewing companies. So there's this huge thing that's happening out there. And if a company comes in and they basically say, or a brand, let's say, which is a company, and they say, okay, marketing department, we're looking for a new chief marketing officer, how are we going to get the best of the best? We want the best of the best. So how do they do this? You mentioned if they have a crappy website, if the company has a crappy website and it's not really relating very well their brand culture, what it's like to work there. Facebook and Google, they all do a very good job at that. And everybody wants that $250,000 starter job at Facebook, right? So how do you take we're looking for this person with these skills from an HR perspective.
But don't think so myopically about it. I mean, it's just like, I think that what we are talking about is that you can't just pull a thread and have it, the whole garment unravel. It's just like, it's not going to happen with an easy solution. You need to involve marketing throughout the entire communication structure of your HR department to make sure that you're projecting and managing the conversation outside of the organization, that you're projecting the right messaging and you're projecting the right image, so that when you do get to writing that perfect post to try to get that new CMO or CEO into the organization, you're able to do so with the backing of superior content strategies and some superior marketing programs that are all.
At the end of the day, you're selling a product, basically.
Right, exactly.
I mean, by the way,
go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, quickly. One thing I just want to add also, and I know, Wendy, you're just giving the examples of the Googles and the Facebooks, but one thing I would just advise people listening to this is that it becomes so much more of a competitive advantage if you've got strong employer branding when you're a smaller company, because if somebody's looking at you, the agency of 15 people, versus another one, and you do a great job, and the other agency is totally ignoring that aspect of their communications, you're going to win out every single time. If it's a Google or a Facebook, I mean, God bless the person who hasn't heard of them and doesn't know something about what it's like to work there right now in the first place. So,
no, I think that's a good point. Now Google's a search engine, right?
Yeah, well, Google is an advertising company.
It's a platform. Okay, but listen, here I just have
It's a
to
huge
add this.
company.
First, it's very big. Wendy, you had me at hello, and the other thing that I wanted to add.
Okay, someone's
that-
moving their microphone around. Say if they have to stop it or go on mute. But go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, Wendy, you had me at hello. Definitely, I think you're right on. But the one thing that I would add is that from an HR perspective, there's a couple things that I wanted to add. Number one, from an HR component, if we don't talk about us, then they will, is the adage. In other words, if we don't start beating our chest and get our message out there and put our people on platforms and things like that, the employees that leave us will talk about us, and not in a good way. Okay, that being said, I would also add that if you think about it, just like any of the marketing initiatives and big advertising things that we've done over the years, we always say you have to own sight, sound, and soul. Well, your soul comes from the people that you hire to begin with. So if HR, I'm not saying our HR needs to be your marketing department, but I will tell you, I remember when I was going for my first chief job, and the first meeting was with the HR department, and it's a nightmare because they don't know what to ask you. So, Jonathan, what's your style of management? I don't know. What is my style of management? I'm here to be chief digital officer. I guess I reinforce people and try to get them to do the best job they can or something. The point is they don't understand my experience. In fact, I think HR should be brought in more to the positioning and the marketing of the agency as its soul. So if you look at sight, sound, and soul as the pillars, what is the soul of the brand? What is the soul of your agency? Which is my background. The soul of your agency is the people. So make that soul flourish, make it shareable, make people, give them incentives to talk about it, put it on their reviews. I think that's important because from my perspective, the only thing that I would ever interview ever again would be a chief of something, and to come in there and meet with HR would be a huge letdown if they don't even understand their own company.
Yeah, it's great points. And like I say, it goes back to what I've been saying for years. I always have felt that HR and the rest of the company are rife for opportunities for marketing to fix the messaging and make sure that we're projecting the right image. Because, it's important to understand that everything fires off the brand, and that marketing's job is not to come up with cute little ads on TV and direct mail pieces. It's about trying to manage the entire communication presence outside of this company. And I think
Bob, you are just a very smart guy, though. That's
why.
And it looks like you're probably going to be able to get a whole bunch of gigs now in that category.
And also, since we're on the topic, I think, Bob, you just, in order to be the smartest person in the room, you just can't be in a room with Christopher Penn.
Rim shot.
On that note, let's move on. I read an interesting article about the internal politics at Walmart in regard to their e-commerce efforts. Now, the basic premise of this article was that Walmart may not have the will to do what's necessary to fully compete with Amazon. For instance, everybody knows that the reason Amazon is so successful at getting packages out to people as quickly as they can is because they have warehouses everywhere, and they've invested in a warehouse infrastructure that is far superior to everybody else. Yet Walmart is unwilling to invest in more warehouses because they just want the e-commerce to start making more money. But the e-commerce guy is going, this is not going to happen unless we make these investments. So Wendy, considering that Walmart physical stores are doing better than ever, and that's really surprising but very true, Does Walmart really need to face Amazon head on, or can they pivot toward a differentiated subset of e-commerce that kind of integrates and activates their stores as the primary driver of response? What's your thoughts on Walmart's situation, and how should they compete?
Well, you know me. I have a lot of thoughts on all of this, and just for everyone listening, I am a brand seller on Amazon because I own a brand there, and that I pretty much only sell on Amazon because they control everything. I don't sell one on my product-centric website, and I do not sell on Walmart for many reasons. But let me answer your question. Because I also know logistics and back end and all of that very well, and I'm very well aware, my fulfillment company is right across the street from Walmart's huge mile-long warehouse they built in Chino, California. And the how Walmart functions on the back end is such a disgrace and such a mess. But let's just start from the front end. Walmart is Walmart. Okay, so Walmart isn't where people go to shop. Everyone, they get in their car and they can drive to a Walmart store. I've been to one maybe 3 times in my entire life. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure it is not the top of mind retailer that you go shop at, even online.
I'm actually there right now, Wendy. So,
so what happens is that Walmart, Walmart bought Jet. They did all of that. They made a big mistake in doing that. They put a ton of money into the advertising of Jet. But the way that Walmart functions on their online presence, if you were to open up your browser and put Amazon on the right side and Walmart on the left side, you will see a distinctive difference on how even just the visual, the sponsored ads, Amazon has got it going on, and it really is the only place that people really want to go to shop because they know, like, and trust it. It's convenience, A to Z guarantee, prime shipping. Where Walmart goes wrong is that Walmart was built from a retail store where price was everything. If you couldn't buy it for $3.44 cents for some reason, at Walmart, this is what they want to sell it to you. Everything is dirt cheap. Now, if you go on Walmart.com and you start looking at what they have on there, it's all freaking third-party sellers. So when they opened the doors up a few years ago, right after I think they bought Jet, they opened it up to third-party sellers because they wanted to compete with Amazon, because Amazon is looked at as a third-party selling site, right?
Right.
But Amazon also has Brand Central. They have vendors where you can be an Amazon vendor. There's many different ways to sell on Amazon. But Walmart is relying on their third-party sellers to ship the products to the customer. This is the reason they don't think they need all the warehouses, because they don't have a prime system. Right? They don't have a system where I pack up my product, I send it to Moreno Valley, it gets into the Amazon system, and now Amazon takes care of my customer service for me as a brand seller. They take care of my shipping for me as a brand seller. Sure, I pay for that, right? But they take care of all of that. I never touch or talk to that customer ever. I'm not allowed to.
Here's the situation. As far as I can gather from reading this article and from my own studies into the situation, I would disagree with you on a couple points. One would be that Jet was a bad idea for them. I think that Jet was probably the one smart idea they had. They're just not willing to listen to that guy who founded Jet, who knows how to build these systems and knows how to build this kind of operation. And they're just refusing to take his advice. So I think that for me,
they're not building the warehouses that they need to compete,
right.
Bob, with Amazon.
But going back to my original premise, though, the other thing is you're claiming that nobody goes to Walmart, but a lot of people
go to Walmart stores.
Yeah, a lot of people shop there.
Not my point.
Okay.
A lot of people go to Walmart stores, and a lot of people, it's a demographic of people that go to Walmart stores. Okay. And they like it's price driven. Amazon is not price driven. Amazon is convenience and trust driven. It is not low price driven. Walmart is. And so people like to go and shop at Walmart for that reason. They have very inferior products at Walmart. I'm sorry. They're cheap. They're not, it's not the same thing as Amazon has has reliable products, brand products. You can't sell cheap garbage on Amazon. They will not allow you to do that. They just won't. Okay.
I've bought plenty of cheap garbage on Amazon. I mean, but it's just like I think that
Well,
the
you can
review,
return it though, right?
yeah, you can most of the time as long as you're getting
And
it on
I've gotten
Prime.
some nicer stuff at Walmart every now and then, but I'm not there that often. But like I would one thing, and just to jump in though, what I'll say is that I think you're definitely right about the brand equity and the brand promise
Thank
needs
you.
to be consistent across channels, because I think you're spot on about that. The one thing that I would say is that Walmart, in order to be a true competitor, doesn't actually, this is where Bob, I kind of almost disagree with the premise in a little bit, it doesn't have to have the same strategy as Amazon. If you have the same strategy as Amazon to tackle e-commerce, you are going to lose. Therefore, in order
Exactly.
to compete effectively long term, I think you do need to have a slightly different strategy.
And
I
that,
think
that's
yeah.
that was the basic premise I was putting forward, was this idea that, I mean, do you need to compete with them head on, or can you somehow come up with a
can't.
differentiated?
You can't.
Right. So should they be differentiating this subset of e-commerce that, like I say, integrates, activates stores, that really focuses on the physical locations?
Look at Target, for instance, right? Target has their online presence, and they do a really great job with their online presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you go into a Target store, they decided that they were going to spend their money in making your visit to a Target store an experience. They started to build out the living rooms in the center of the store, right? The super Target stores or whatever. They just changed the experience. You can pick up your stuff, or, they're going to drive you and bring you into the store because you can now pick things up there. And then you go inside and you go, oh, while I'm here, I'm going to get some milk. That kind of mentality. Target does a really great job with that and has kick-ass advertising and creative. Walmart, on the other hand, they've been around since 1900, and they have this stigma that is attached to them that they are a price-driven, everyday low prices are at Walmart. Stick to what you know. Bring people into your store and give them a really wonderful experience. There's no reason why you have to compete with Amazon, whose genesis was always to be the best online retailer or resource for books and tapes, and then it grew very intelligently into every other category, right? But they also have a membership fee. They have sponsored key terms and sponsored ads, that they have this revenue that is being brought in that enables them to be sustainable, even if they probably never sell one more product. And then they have their very intelligent warehousing across the United States. It's all, location, location, location.
By the way, quick reminder for everybody to dress up for Prime Day.
Yeah, I have my Prime Day costume ready to go.
Prime Day is just to get rid of all of the crap that they have in the warehouse that they can't get rid of. That's
why
why
I'm gonna buy it. I want to help them out.
Yeah, we all want to help them out. Those poor guys. I hope they're doing okay. The only thing that I would add to that is that the thing is number one, video killed the radio star. Okay, and my friend Jeff Downs wrote that song. I thought I'd give him a quick plug there. But anyway, I think that if you take that into that scenario, what's happening right now is you've got Walmart. We were lead agency of record of Walmart when I was back at the Martin agency. So I've worked with these guys directly for a long time. And there's too much infighting over the digital business versus the brick and mortar. That has never gone away. That's been a terrible relationship or non-relationship ever since the beginning of all this. But I would also say that they've got a golden opportunity to reinvent themselves. And Bob, to answer your question specifically, they should pivot. You don't want to go head to head with Amazon, but I'll tell you something. With all that Amazon is building up, it's going to come down and backfire on them at some point. It always does. Internet, it killed more industries than it's created. And what's going to happen is, like I said, video killed the radio star. At some point, all those warehouses and stuff is going to backfire on you, because that's real estate and business models that are going to get antiquated because of technology.
No, I don't know, Jonathan. I think what's going to happen to all of those warehouses is that Bezos is going to turn them into Costco's. So they're going to take part of that warehouse and they're going to make it so that the public can come and shop there. So I think that's
Well,
really,
it's got to evolve. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's got to evolve. I'm just saying that what historically, when we've seen companies that build up huge infrastructures, somebody else pivots around them, and it's something that they never saw coming because they were too busy building.
Well, we're running out of time, so I want to hit this last topic real quick. Finally, the race is on these days to find an adequate replacement for the cookie. One suggestion that I read this past week, create a common consumer taxonomy to protect user privacy while still enabling appropriate ad targeting. Jonathan, my head hurts already as soon as the word taxonomy got written out. So, John, what would you say? Would this kind of situation work? Would creating a common consumer taxonomy actually make a difference? And what would creating this involve? Is it even reasonable? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't listen. I've been hearing for years now about walking away from the cookie, the third-party cookie, and it's intrusive and all these other things. I don't see us getting away from it for a long time to come. That's my outside perspective, but it's mainly because there's such a dependence upon it, not only for sniffing active data, but passive data as well, session duration. Unique visitor, repeat visitor, blah blah blah. The thing is that if you do walk away from it, somebody's got to build a better cookie. It's the old Ford quote, where if I would have asked people what they wanted, right? I think what's going to happen is I think we're dealing with the third-party cookies for some time to come. I think the IAB and all these other guys saying a unique user ID that can follow you around that isn't intrusive. I think we're still building. You would just be building another cookie run by another entity. That's my opinion.
Eaon, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, the idea of creating some kind of common consumer taxonomy, is that better than a user ID? Is it like Jonathan posits? Is it just another kind of cookie?
Yeah, I'm not. I did. I talked at a conference last year actually with. Do you know Don Marty? Has he been on the show?
No, he's not.
Yeah. Oh, you should get him on. He's like, later on I'll maybe intro. He's one of the smartest guys that he's at Mozilla, and he's one of the smartest people talking about the third-party tracking space. And obviously Mozilla, have taken steps in the browser to protect people, as have Safari. And there is, there's a general sort of trend now of browsers, blocking this type of tracking. Partly it's to protect users. But I think, the underlying thing is that, the third-party tracking sort of thing that's emerged over the last few years, it hasn't really benefited anyone. It doesn't really benefit publishers. It's not really good for consumers, and it's not good for brands either. From thinking about the lack of signal, if you like, in online advertising. So in the general sense, you would say a reflection of a brand is the company that it keeps, and so when ads follow people, and people, human nature as it is, people go off into questionable areas of the internet, and that tracking follows them there.
Well, that's interesting, that distinction, because when you create a user ID, you can still track people. I assume a user ID is going to still allow people from first-party sites to continue to track behavior on a site and assign it to a unique personal ID. So in a lot of ways, that is just another form of cookie. But with a taxonomy, you've got to change the entire structure, because if I'm not understanding this correctly, when you create a taxonomy, you don't give information down to the user level. You only give consumer types. So you're not able to do things like follow them around the internet with advertising for that blouse that you looked at the last site that you visited. I mean, but you do have to have some kind of messaging that's targeted to that type of individual. And for me, that sounds really interesting in terms of user privacy, but it sounds less effective overall, and something that a lot of brands will be just loath to even begin to try to put into place. I mean,
that's right. But unless you wipe the slate clean and say, okay, everybody, we're going to start all over with this type of technology, the big guys that are controlling the third party, they're not going to have it.
Right. Agreed.
Well, with that, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Wendi Cooper. You can find her at wendicooper.com. That's the home of her podcast. It's the home of everything that she's doing. I'll just let you tell them what you're up to. What would you like to promote this week?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yes, it is my home. I also still have C-Spot Run Productions, and you can go to cspotrun.com. But what I want to promote is I have kind of pivoted and made a turn into focusing on, especially from the creative side, on the 50-plus market. I'm very involved. My podcast has morphed into something where we do, my guest, we talk about the second half of life, what it's like to, be going through this period if you're over 50, all of the ageism that is happening in our society. And from there, it grew into me coming up with some solutions for ageism that no one else is working on. So I am super excited about this platform. I cannot announce what it is, but it is for creatives, for gigs, for connecting a community of modern, mature adults over 50 on all different levels, but not on diet, fitness, and you should look like a freaking rock star because you're over 50, because that is not going to happen. But I'm super excited about moving my consulting for D2C and my creative wisdom into the over 50 category, the mature audience. So super excited about that. So if anybody wants to talk to me about that, you know where to reach me. It's at wendicooper.com.
And yeah, definitely get in touch with Wendi. I mean, she's a wealth of information in anything to do with the marketing space. And, this new pivot has been really interesting to watch, Wendi. So congratulations and good luck with it all. Next up, we have Jeremy Goldman. You can find him at proponent.agency. That's the home of the agency that now hosts Jeremy Goldman, I guess.
Yeah, so actually that's a perfect transition. So the number one thing I'm working on now is I spent 6 months on this transition after I sold my agency, just finished a few days ago. So now I'm kind of figuring out what I'm going to do, probably on the brand side in a CMO type role or head of insight, something fun like that. But that's not my shameless plug. By all means, hire me. But my shameless plug is that I'm starting to research my third book, which tentatively will come out next year, about how to be a better predictor of the future and of which marketing technologies are going to take over and when. If you have anybody smart that I should be talking to, just tweet me at JeraMarketer. It'll probably take me at least 90 seconds to respond.
Okay, 90 seconds. And that's very true. Jeremy is a very responsive individual. Next up, we have Eaon Pritchard. Eaon, you can find him at Universal McCann, which is umww.com. Just look for the Melbourne office. Tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
I'm still so my book that came out last year. So I'm just finishing the second one just now, but the first one is all I've got for sale. So yeah, so it's called Where Did It All Go Wrong? Adventures at the Dunning-Kruger Peak of Advertising. Available on Amazon worldwide and discerning bookstores. So yeah, I was going to say I won't be buying the yacht just quite yet, but yeah, it sold quite well last year. So.
No one buys
actually
it.
half price on Amazon at the moment, I believe, under $10. So.
No one buys a yacht on their first book. We're all in that boat. We know that. Last but not least, we have Jonathan Sackett. You can find him at allscope.com. That's where he is the president and the chief creative officer. You can also find him at Mashburn Enterprises, where he's a board member. But tell me, what's going on in your world, Jonathan? What would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, Bob is one of my best friends. I would say help me promote this show. I think it's a great outlet. I think, Bob, you get the best guests in the industry. I would say anybody that wants to do business with anybody, any of my fellow contestants on tonight's show, really great people, really smart people. So I'm very privileged to be a part of this tonight. I appreciate it. Jamal, there's some big announcements coming out on Revolution Cannabis. As you may or may not know, I'm knee deep in renaming the company. We're opening 30 dispensaries in Florida alone. We're already here in Chicago, where I am. We're also in Massachusetts, Maryland, Colorado, and now the Florida expansion with our own 30 dispensaries. We've got 270-acre farms. There's a lot going on. So watch what we do with the branding of that, and some very big announcements about a new chief of the board of directors is going to be announced this week, Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. If you can't see that in the news or you can't find it, you can always follow me on Twitter at Jonathan Sackett. And there's just so many exciting things coming up. This cannabis thing and the CBD and the oils and the pet products and blah blah blah. We've got it all going on. It's a really exciting time, and we're really pioneering it. So you're going to see a lot of great things about us coming out very, very soon.
Yeah, I've always been impressed about the way that you guys are very forward thinking in the way you place your bets. So it should be an interesting time to watch.
Thank you.
And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, with everyone in fast food exploring their plant-based meat options, Arby's doubled down on the real thing by creating a meat-based veggie, specifically meat carrots. Now, Jonathan, I'm looking at this, and this is the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen. Yet at the same time, it created so much conversation, and it's so interesting. And apparently, it doesn't even taste all that bad.
Well, you know what, Bob? As soon as I saw that, I was going to say, Bob, you had me at meat carrots. Hey, you know what? At least they're sticking to their guns, or they're sticking to their meat, or something.
Well, yeah.
I love it. I love it. I think it's just freaking awesome. I love their commercials. I actually will eat their food, and I probably might eat a Merit one day.
Yeah, they've come
I
a
love
long
it.
way. They were like listed #1 on the dirtiest restaurants for years. So that's quite a comeback. And now they've got that guy talking like this. So hey, that's a dual punch, man.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with it. What I'm less impressed about is our bad for the week. Apparently, soccer powerhouse Arsenal nor their sponsor Adidas has learned from decades of marketing experience that has taught us if you give consumers or fans the opportunity to customize and publicly post in a promotional campaign, they're going to embarrass you. This is a rule. We should know this by now. They came up with the hashtag Dare to Create Twitter effort that allowed users to create and share images of Arsenal jerseys featuring your Twitter handle in the player name spot. Sounds innocent enough, right, Jeremy? Unfortunately, people can create all kinds of Twitter handles, which made for some problematic things, didn't it?
To say the least, I think that it's one of those things where you have to keep a very consistent eye on how anybody can hijack anything at any time, and what can go wrong will.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, I think our mutual friend Joe Jaffe would have had the greatest laugh, given he's a Tottenham fan. Tottenham being Arsenal.
I'm absolutely sure that Joe had a good laugh about this. And now we have our ugly of the week. And this is not so much an ugly on Nike themselves, but more about the situation they found themselves in and how ugly it got. Nike stepped in it with their limited edition Independence Day shoe when it was called out by their endorser Colin Kaepernick for its use of the Betsy Ross flag. Now, Kaepernick noted that the flag has been co-opted by white nationalists and other hate groups. Nike pulled the shoe, Wendi, but it ignited an ugly debate over the issue as a whole. Do you take back a symbol of American heritage if it's taken by Nazis and make it your own again? Do you just cede the control of that icon to the Nazis and say this is theirs now? I mean, this is a really difficult situation that they just blundered into.
Well, I think it's kind of weird that, well, who chose that flag anyway? Why did they use that flag on the shoe? Was that just, well, let's go back to the day when our flag was made? Why not just put a regular flag on the shoe? I mean, seriously. Why did they use that flag to begin with? What was the rationale behind that choice?
Well, and by the way, Betsy Ross had nothing to do with the flag. That's common knowledge now, isn't it?
Well, but if the flag existed, it doesn't matter whether Betsy Ross made the flag or not.
Burns crosses. Does that mean I can't go to, Catholic church?
Well, Kaepernick would tell you shouldn't go to church anymore.
Kaepernick would tell me a lot, and I'd tell him a lot too, I'm sure.
No, but it's just like, as I thought about that fact about, maybe they could have put a regular American flag on there, a 50-star American flag. But that's been done so many times before. There's lots of shoes with American flags on them, or have been in the past. So why not do something a little bit different? I can see the designer saying, this will be different. It'll look different. It'll stand out. It'll make a bold statement, not really realizing the history of the flag and how it's being co-opted by hate groups right now. So
I wonder how many shoes they had made that they had to pull.
Oh, it was such a limited edition. I'm sure it didn't hurt them in any way financially to pull this thing. I mean,
no,
it's just like,
where are they now?
Hey,
I want a pair.
Wendi, all 27 shoes have been pulled. Okay.
27, not 28.
No, there was 27, and those were single shoes too. They were all a right size. The right shoe, right foot, and between 6 and men's 11. So.
Well, have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #GBU. That's #GBU. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.